Hello, guys. Thanks for joining in on this session today. It's an exciting time for us because we are beginning with a completely new series on product management. And it is particularly interesting because now we are targeting people who want to break into product management and people who are early in their careers in colleges and they want to get insights on how to get into product management. So this particular series is called Breaking into Product Management, and this is where we bring in people who you all can relate to, specifically APMs, PMs who have recently joined good companies, and ask them for specific things and tactics where we can learn how they break into product management, so you all can learn as well. So without further ado, for the first session, we have Saxena with us. He's currently working as an APM2 at Flipkart, and he had studied at BITS before. So I'll let Anuj introduce himself, but we'll keep it a super casual chat so that we all can learn insights from Anuj and get to know what has helped him break into product management, more so specifically at a company like Flipkart, which a lot of young folks aspire to join, right? So, Anuj, can you please walk us through your journey and with a slight focus on how and when did you decide to get into product management?
Sure. So thank you, Aditya, for the kind introduction. And as Aditya said, right, I think all of you are at stages where you would be able to relate to me very closely. It's been 2 years for me into product management, and I started into product management as a fresher from engineering. So just to give a brief about myself, I'm Anuj Saxena, as Aditya has already told you. I hail from Bangaon. It's a small village in Madhya Pradesh, and I did my college from BITS, and I did my engineering in electronics and communication engineering from BITS Hyderabad. So, I think most of you would relate, and I think most people who are sitting here would relate when I say that I did not find my branch to my liking, and I did not think that I'll be able to, do justice to the degree that I am going to hold, and I was quite worried. And as Aditya asked about how I got into product management. So to be very, very honest, my CGPA before the semester that I was supposed to sit for placement was 5.9, and there was just one role which I coveted, which was the APM program. I had heard about it from my peers in BITS Goa, and I knew that it had a zero CGPA cutoff, and I was like, this is something that I have to give a shot. And my interview was going to happen somewhere around December end, or January first week, and I got to, I started thinking about preparing from July, August, and I started keeping in my mind that this is something that let's see how it goes, and started browsing through what is product management, what kind of things. And when I was browsing through, the first video which really attracted me towards product management was the iPhone launch by Steve Jobs, and the way he talked about it, it just blew me. And then I kept thinking and thinking. I watched the Jobs movie that came, right, and it really changed my outlook on the day-to-day products that we have been using so casually, right? How does Instagram make sure that we are addicted to our screens all day? How does Netflix have such an appeal that none of the previous video players have created? And to answer these questions, I started getting more and more into it, and I was hooked. It was finally a non-tech role, is what people would say, but it's entirely not true, and I'll come to that part later. But it was finally a role where I could get into and I could use my brains and create something of value. And I just could see an exciting path from there, and I decided to give it my all and start preparing at full flow. And that's how I got thinking about product management, and I started preparing for my Flipkart interview. So yeah.
Nice. Awesome, awesome. That's super cool to hear because people who usually have lower CGPA start getting demotivated on the paths that they have and the options that they have to move forward in their careers. and especially when it comes to a space like product management, which is super competitive, and in a company like Flipkart where the acceptance rate is probably like 0.2 or 3%, right, if I'm not wrong.
It's 0.02. So yeah.
Wow, crazy. So can you just help us understand how did you go about preparing for the interview process, and what are specific tips and specific things that you did to prepare, and how did the interview go? Maybe a few things about the interview process in itself.
Sure. So, the time that we're talking about when I had my interview was 2018, and product management was, it had just started evolving in India. And there were not a lot of people, who were getting into product management, and there were not a lot of resources or seniors or peers I could reach out to who would help me. Thankfully, that outlook has changed. And there were also not enough entry level product management roles from engineering colleges. Now there are a lot of APM roles coming out from a lot of exciting startups.
Right.
I personally know around 10 to 12 startups which have started hiring for APM roles from engineering colleges. So it's very exciting time to be right now for product management. But during that point of time, I just reached out to the people who were working in Flipkart in product, and thankfully, luckily, one of them replied and through LinkedIn, and he just told me that you should read this book called Cracking the PM Interview. That's the holy grail, and everybody talks about this book, right? And I was like, okay, I shall give it a read. And I started reading this book, and trust me, I think for anybody who is serious about product management, Cracking the PM Interview is one of the most useful resources that you will ever get, right? But then I started looking deeply. I started reading about a lot of Google. So Google had this APM program which Flipkart bought into India, and where you would take engineering graduates and for their logical thinking, and you will try to groom them into better product managers which are groomed inside your company. So I started reading about what kind of rounds will be there, and more or less in every product interview you will find rounds which test three major skills. So the first skill that they are going to test is your problem solving skill, right? Which is, I think, at the core of product management. I don't know a single product manager who's not been a good problem solver. And by problem solver, it's not necessarily just math problems, it's everyday problem, right? People wanted good recommendations. Spotify saw it as an opportunity and came in at the point when Apple was charging us 99 cents for music download. So it started this whole new idea about streaming, and doing a subscription based streaming where everybody could hear the music legally for upfront cost. Similarly, there were so many other startups who came out of solving problems innovatively. Flipkart itself started with the understanding that Indian customers don't want to pay online. So they started with COD. And it was essentially, what Amazon was doing, but with COD. So that was a very small innovation, which has created a $20 billion uh, company today, right? It's a mammoth. So I think
Exactly.
personally, the way that I saw it was problem solving was one thing that I had to get right. Along with problem solving, the other skills were how do I communicate my thoughts, right? So your communication skills in terms of how precise you are thinking and how concisely you can explain what you are trying to say was very important, and combined with your understanding for technology, right? And as I told you, I did not have any background in coding. I was not interested in my branch at all. So in the proper terms, I would say my technological exposure was not that great, right? But what I used to do all the time was I used to read about the latest technologies that are coming in and how do they work, how do they interact, how do users interact with them. IoT was a thing that time. Big data was a huge uh, thing, right? So I used to read these articles, and then I remember there was this cryptocurrency wave, and where Bitcoin and everything was going off the charts, and I invested in Bitcoin that time. And before investing, I started reading about the tech stack and how Bitcoins are manufactured and all those things. And it was just, the day you spend. So I used to just go to TechCrunch and read some articles, and I used to spend like half an hour on reading these articles. And this has been my habit since my second or third year in college. So I used to read a lot about new products and things that are coming. So coming to Flipkart, we had three rounds. One was the problem solving round. Second was the product thinking round, wherein they check, your design sense. And by design sense, it means your user experience understanding, right? Design is not colors, and design is uh, not only colors and how it looks visually, but rather the use of access or use, how easy it is to use, right? So if you look at the things around you, right, your coffee mug, somebody designed it to hold it like that, right? So all
Right.
these are examples of good design. So there is this book by Don Norman, which I used to read. It's called Design of Everyday Things. And Don Norman was the chief designer for Apple. And I was fascinated by how good design and bad design are around us everywhere, right? Like the push or pull door and everything that we see around us. So the first interview I go in, and I was asked about, how do you rank, uh, how would you rank products on the search page of Flipkart, and how would you rank jackets on the search page of Flipkart, right? So I was like, okay, let me start, right? And the key to problem solving is to have a really solid structure at the beginning, and basically cover down all the bases that you are trying to answer. And I started with, that jackets can have multiple dimensions, right? They can be winter jackets, or they can be summer jackets, and then you will have price points for jackets, right? And what does Flipkart have that will help us understand that the search results, how should we populate them, right? They have immense amount of data. Daily around more than 50 lakh users visit Flipkart, and they are clicking, and we know the kind of clicks that they do, the kind of purchases that they have made. You can figure out the kind of average prices that they will be shopping for. And I kind of told them about a pricing index that I would make. And pricing
Right.
index would be, let's say, for somebody who has never purchased a jacket, and let's say they have purchased a mobile phone, what what are the 80 percentile phones priced at? So you take all the bottom priced 80 percentile phones, take that number and take an average of the cost of all the phones on Flipkart, and see how far they are from these two numbers, right? So that will, and do this for all the categories that they have made a purchase into, right? And look at the kind of keywords that they are searching for. Are they searching for t-shirts under 500, which is another indicator that this person is looking for something like this, right? So you
Right.
identify a price index, and let's say jackets have an average price of 22,000. Then you start looking around that, right? So somebody who has a price index closer to the average, you start showing them products closer to the average, but you also keep some potential to upsell. And by upsell, I
Right.
mean keep one product which is priced at say 2,800 or 3,000, which is the best seller in that range. So that person will be tempted that, this is a really good product and maybe I can spend 3,000 here. And that way, the more money they spend, the more Flipkart gains, right?
Right.
So in a way, that was how I approached my first question. Then second was about product thinking, right? So as I told you about problem solving, any company that asks you about problem solving, right, can you have to create a plausible structure about how you're going to approach a problem. Then hit all the points one after the other, right? Then post which for the product thinking round, I was asked, how would you launch Google in Mongolia, right? So a very interesting thing happened to me when I was, as I told you, I used to read a lot of things when back in my college days, right? So I had read this article about color philosophy, right?
Yeah.
And it essentially meant that people can associate certain meanings to color, right? Like you can associate happiness to a blue color, and people
Right.
can associate feelings with colors, right? And Mongolia, I clarified the situation, had was a nation which was not under, which was did not have a lot of concerts, a lot of happy events. So I told them that we should, to launch Google, first thing we should have a carnival which should be comprised entirely of the colors in Google logo and nothing else. So everything in that carnival should be in colors of Google logo. And when people attend that carnival, they are going to see that they're going to be happy because they've never seen anything like it before. They're going to get excited and they're going to associate those feelings with Google and start trusting it as a brand, right? And I think that is the first step that any brand needs to do, that develop that trust that we are here to help you, we are here to make you happy, or whatever their mission statement is. And then I went around the standard mode of launching a product, print and TV, and I gave, I compared it with India of 1980s, and drew that parallel about how the things might be there, how there might be just one TV in 10 houses, and what time they would be watching, what are the biggest shows. And we kept going around about how can we monetize YouTube once it's launched, and it was a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But the key takeaway for product thinking rounds, right? Very standard questions come, right? How would you design a alarm clock for the blind, or how would you design a new walking stick for the blind, right? These are some of the most asked questions, right? And all of this require you to empathize with the user, right? Like I did with Mongolia, about what is it that those people crave, what is it that those people need, and how do you build that so your product needs to be stellar, and then how do you communicate that your product has that value,
Right.
right? So combined with these things, I was able to answer this. And possibly if we have time post this and people want to know more, I can go in depth about how I approach the interview, but for the sake of time, I'll move forward. So then the last round was my technical round, right? And I had absolutely no coding background, and I get into the room, and the senior director of engineering for Flipkart is interviewing me, and I enter and I tell him, sir, I don't have any coding experience. So please don't ask me any technical jargons or coding, but if you would ask me the logic behind how things work and logic behind technology, I would be able to answer it better. And he's like, okay, so let me ask you something. So he started and he asked me, the first question was, if you go to a web browser and type www.flipkart.com and press enter, tell me what happens from the moment you press enter to the moment you see that page, right? And I remembered a few bits and pieces about computer networks that I had, learned or read somewhere, and I started building up that story, and I went by the logic of it. You have a computer, it's connected to internet, your computer has a unique address, which we know as the IP address, right? Which says,
Right.
this is Anuj's computer, or this is a particular computer. And from this computer, you are going to send a signal to possibly a repository of central data, which is connected through a server, where the information of all the web pages around the world is stored. And just to make sure that because I've always seen that HTTPS in front of every website. So just to make sure that nobody is able to look at this interaction between me and the server, we are going to encrypt it in some way and send it to that key store and get that information from there and relay it on my PC, right? And then he asked me about cryptography, and thankfully I had read about Bitcoins. And that's why I keep telling, right? So the key to being a good product manager is to be excited about technology and to keep reading about it. He asked me about cryptography and how it works and what are symmetrical and asymmetrical keys. And I was able to answer it because I had taken one cryptography class on YouTube one day because I just found it interesting after reading Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. And it had a lot about cryptography, and I just took that one class and it helped me on that day on the interview. And I would have never thought that information is going to come and help me here. And if you don't know much about technology, if you are not a expert coder, no need to worry. It's all about, try to break it down to the most basic building blocks and try to go by the most logical thing that you can present and explain it like you're explaining to a 5-year-old. I did that and I got in, right? So we were 13, we were a batch of 13 in the APM program and recruited from all over India. And I was one of those 13 people by using this philosophy. So instead of overcomplicating it, the real approach really lies in the basics of product management, which we'll cover as the interview, as this talk goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I think like thanks for answering this in such detail and sharing like exact things that you were asked and how you approach them. I think that is super useful, super helpful. And another thing that I like sort of noticed is the level of curiosity, right? at every point of time, you mentioned right from the college days, right, until the interview prep and during the interview as well. That level of curiosity is something that like always helped you answer things
Absolutely.
and become better, right? And I think that's a great takeaway for people preparing, and I think in general also it's great advice to be curious. So I think great tips around how to approach interviews. Just a small follow up question on that. If you think someone has to apply for say either an APM program or for an APM or a junior PM position for a high growth startup, how much like if you had to put a quantitative term to it, how many months or how many weeks do you think it takes to be fully prepared so that you can ace your interviews?
See, there is no absolute answer to this, right? But to answer it objectively, I think you should. There are key factors for every APM interview that you go through,
Yeah,
right? So there are certain things which are constant, right? Like I told, problem solving, product thinking, understanding of tech, and how you communicate that, right?
yeah,
Then there are bits and pieces about the company that you're going for, right? A lot of people
right,
reach out to me regarding how I can get into APM programs and how I can, apply for these interviews.
right,
So try to analyze a lot of companies that have APM programs and try to read the problem statements that they're working on. And it's always a good idea to do a deep dive into their products and what kind of philosophy they have behind that product, right? Flipkart is a consumer friendly company, right? We're looking to make sure that the customers who come to Flipkart are always happy and they're trying to shop, because if they are happy, then they'll shop more. So
right,
when you sit for a company like Flipkart, your answers should roam around that consumer friendly behavior and that consumer friendly understanding, right? For a
right,
company which is, let's say, a B2B platform, which is providing services to another business, the consumers are these businesses. So you have to talk about architectural nuances, or possibly how can you uh, solve problems at scale, right? So it's very important to do the right prep and also not get into too many resources, right? I cannot
right,
stress this enough. There are so many resources floating around and everybody is running about, I will read this book, I'll read that book, I'll go for this, I'll listen to this person, I'll do this blog. What is more essential is to get your basics right and analyze products on your own, and not run after a lot of resources, and identify 3 or 4 key resources that work for you. And
right.
if you do that, I think around 3 months is what I would give. 3 months of dedicated preparation is what I would give before you can, apply for an APM role.
Perfect. I think 3 months is something that is ideal according to me as well, because like you mentioned in your answer as well, there are different types of different areas on upon which you are judged by in an interview. So to give ample amount of time for each of those domains, it is I think 2 to 3 months is an ideal time frame. Now switching gears a bit, like from interviews to say the job world, right? There are things that you learn in theory, and there are things that practically happen when you enter the job. And
Yes.
like you mentioned in your background as well, you had no tech experience and you had no background of working on a product as well. So if I had to ask, say, in your first 6 months at Flipkart, what are sort of challenges that you faced, and how did you like overcame those?
Sure. So, see, for the first 6 months in Flipkart, I think the first challenge that I faced was I was overwhelmed with the kind of problem statements that were being thrown at me.
Right,
I started my first year in Flipkart as the product manager for the desktop website. So I was handling the user experience of the desktop website of Flipkart, that is flipkart.com. And I
right,
had to ensure that if 100 people come to the website, more and more people are shopping on it,
right,
right? So how do I increase the unit conversion on Flipkart, right? And I was overwhelmed because it's a very big problem statement about how do I make people shop more by changing something on my website, right?
right,
There are 1,000 questions to it. So, which is where I got, I think whenever I was stuck, I used the help of the product leaders at my organization, and they were really kind to, always give me the right advices and not take everything and teach it to me, and they just let me, I'm going to throw you into the pool and you'll have to learn to swim yourself and come out of this.
Yeah.
So and the first advice that my manager gave me was, you have to get comfortable with data, and every answer that you are asking lies in data.
Yeah.
So I started analyzing data, and trust me, I mean, it was a eye-opening experience for me how much we can learn from data. I think for around 15 days, I spent 6 hours a day on just analyzing the kind of traffic Flipkart got, from where these people were coming, which internet service providers they were using, what kind of I did area to price mapping, internet to price mapping. Then we don't store people, their ages and names, so that was a roadblock. But I tried creating personas of the kind of users that might come to Flipkart, and the kind of, this might be a lady from, let's say, a tier 2 city or tier 3 city from Uttar Pradesh or Bihar or MP or Andhra Pradesh, right? And these are the kind of things that these people are looking at buying, and these might be the challenges that they face, right? So essentially, the first advice I would give to any person who is getting into APM, and once you get into it, right, is be comfortable with data. I think there is no substitute to that. It is something that you can start on your own. So I think that really helped me. The other challenges I faced was, how do I write a PRD? And PRD is a holy grail for a product manager.
Yeah.
It's a product requirement document, right? So if I am supposed to build a feature, let's say I built a new login experience for Flipkart. So if I'm supposed to build that login experience, then I have to write a product requirement document about how the login flow would look like. And from the minutest of user interaction, I have to explain what would happen, all the use cases, what kind of errors might come if somebody enters a 11-digit phone number, or do we allow it or not, what kind of passwords are allowed, what kind of passwords are not allowed. So I did all of this exercise, and I really faced challenge over here as well. But again, I went down to the basics and started breaking down the problem into really small building blocks. And that really helped. So I think a very good practice is to experiment with data, analyze a lot of products, and see how they are built. There is an article about how Swiggy Pop was built on Medium, and it was a wonderful read for me, because if you read articles like these about how certain products were built or how certain feature of a product were built, it gives you an idea to, develop that sort of thinking.
Right. Right.
So I think the first 2-3 months should be spent a lot on talking to a lot of product managers, talking to people who have built products, understanding how products are made, how data works, and what is the core statement of your company and what you are trying to achieve.
Got it. And like you mentioned, data is super relevant, and it is something that every product manager has to sort of deal with day to day. And suppose if I had to ask you, if someone was in a position where they are trying to get into product management, what are few things that people can do to get better at data specifically? Maybe one or two practical things that people can do right away to get better at data.
Sure, that's a great question. So see, it depends on the kind of proficiency that you're looking for. So for somebody who has absolutely no experience with data, right, I would recommend them to, pick up 10 of their favorite apps,
Yep.
right? And let's say Facebook, Instagram, all the apps that you use daily on your phone, right?
Yes, yes.
And try to get as much data about their browsing, what kind of DAU they have, daily active users do they get, what is their active user base, what is their retention rate, how many users who are coming on, let's say, day 1 come back on day 2, what is their monthly retention, are they making any sort of revenue. So try to do this analysis for these 10 apps and try to get as much data as you can. A lot of this data will be available. You will be shocked at the amount of data that is available. And then try to understand, how a company is approaching their particular, and what might be the key metric, right? Because
Right.
data is something where you can very easily get stuck in analysis paralysis, right? You can keep analyzing and not know where to stop, right? So why I'm asking you to do this exercises, you can I want you all to identify the key matrix that these companies are aiming for. What does Instagram want, right? Instagram tracks its average time spent per user, right? Because
Right.
that is the key metric for them. Spotify tracks the average time a user spends listening on Spotify. For a Google Pay, the number of transactions is a key metric, right?
Right.
So identifying this will help you understand where to look and what to look for. That is the key to data, right? As I told you, I analyzed humongous amounts of data because I knew what I was looking for. I had broken
Exactly.
down that problem statement that my key is to make sure more people come to Flipkart, right?
Yeah.
So to understand this, you will have to develop that aptitude of data and playing with those numbers and try to do these calculations mentally and understanding कि Facebook versus Instagram क्या हो रहा है, WhatsApp versus Facebook versus Instagram, what's happening, how many people are coming, how are they retaining. So all this possibly make some graphs and charts and play around and then try to identify the key metrics. And I think that is something which will change the way you think about
Right.
these products.
Right, right. That's great advice, actually. I think one exercise that all of the attendees who are trying to get into product management or have just entered the field can do is just open your home screen or just open your top three most used apps, and then try to figure out what are the top three metrics that these apps must be tracking, and try to figure out what is the top metric that each of these apps is optimizing for. Like Anuj mentioned. Instagram is optimizing for average time spent per user. So different apps might be optimizing for different metrics, right? So I think this would be a great exercise where you will actually get to, and like Anuj mentioned, metrics like DAU, monthly retention, total user base, all of these data is publicly available for popular apps. So that could be a great exercise for folks who are trying to break into product management. And let's move on to like slightly like you mentioned, when you got into Flipkart, and for the initial few months you got comfortable with data and you learned how to write PRDs and stuff like that. So if I had to ask you, what does your day to day, like a lot of people has this question, right? What does a product manager do on a day to day basis? There is a lot of theory around what is the ideal way and how you should spend your time, and there is the reality on how product managers actually spend their time. So if
Sure.
you had to like share a quick say walk us through how your day looks like in Flipkart working in the product team, what would that be?
Sure. So I think what my day looks like will be, it depends on team to team, right? So, but
Yeah.
essentially I go around and I check my mails. Then as a product manager, it's really important as to which stage of your product you are in currently. So if you are writing a PRD, most of your day will go around researching about competitors, how they have done it, and researching about what has been done in that product before. Currently, I'm handling the inventory buying piece of Flipkart, right? So I go around and I research on how Walmart's and Amazon supply chain works and how are they trying to optimize these supply chain problems, right? And then I spend around 2 hours of my time daily on reading about interesting products, product management research into the kind of articles that are being made or related to my domain, right? And then you have to spend a lot of time with the engineers in stand-ups. You have to go and tell them the product specifications, how the product has to be made, and then you have to go to your other stakeholders and ensure that product is right. So a lot of times in product management jobs is spent around managing your stakeholders and thinking about the product that you are building. So it's more or less around that only, about how do I ensure that people understand what value they are getting out of the product and whether it's functioning or not, what is the feedback on it, how can I improve it. And then I keep weekly mentorship sessions with one of the leaders at Flipkart, so that really
Nice.
helps, right? So yeah, more or less that is what my
Awesome.
day
I
looks
think the
like.
last part is super important, where you schedule time specifically with the people who are much smarter than you to learn, irrespective whether you are in product management or in any function. It is very helpful to get active time from people who are much smarter than you, and learn how they make decisions, learn how they operate things on a day-to-day basis. So
Yes.
that's pretty good. So now, like to deep dive slightly into the same question. What are like you mentioned, you read about different products and you read various articles, etc. What are specific things that you do at work that help you become a better product manager? Say, for example, maybe it can be something around deep diving into data, or maybe ensuring that the teams are well aligned, or trying to learn how, like you mentioned, scheduling time with senior leaders.
Right, right. So you're not audible anymore, Aditya. I think you've gone on mute. So I'll just continue. I'll start answering that question, right? So how I work around. So essentially, I think one of the key takeaways, which has changed from my college to the point where I started working at Flipkart, is how I started using technology. And I personally think that technology is the key for all of the product management folks to move forward. If you start developing a strong hold on technology and start understanding how systems interact, how architecture is made for a big system, right? And how a possible deep learning or machine learning model would work. These things would really go a long way in helping you. And I do a lot of reading around tech, and I'm personally doing this course by Andrew Ng on machine
Yeah.
learning. Andrew Ng has this course. It's a free course on Coursera. You have to pay for the just for the certificate if you want. Otherwise, it's a free course, and it's a wonderful course on machine learning. And I've started finding it really interesting. I think the problem is the way in technology is taught in our colleges is not exciting enough. So if you give it a try and start learning about these things on your own, and look at the products that you have around you, and how bionic arms work, and possibly how a neural artificially intelligent system would work, you'll find it really interesting. So that is something which is very helpful. Then you do a lot of research. As I said, I do a lot of research into products. I keep reading about the new features, and I've started analyzing a new feature whenever product has built it. And like Facebook did changed it a website UI, and it built a lot of micro interactions, and it started to go move towards more of a mobile experience, right? So I started analyzing that. So it's a good practice to have when you start thinking why a certain feature was made. So I do that, and I do a lot of reading on blogs, and I talk, as I told you, talking to key product leaders and taking feedback about the products that you're building is super important. And then stakeholder management is something which comes with time, and I'm getting better at it. But how to manage multiple teams and how to make sure that they are aligned on the need for your product is really important. So problem solving, product thinking, and tech and communication, the four pillars of product management according to me. And doing anything that helps you build on these is great.
Nice, interesting. And on the flip side, say if I had to ask you, apart from work, like apart from your day-to-day job or apart from work, what are other things? Are there any specific things that you do to become better at product? Say for example, maybe attending webinars or reading specific blogs, or say reading particular books, or maybe tactics like just browsing through, like you mentioned, Facebook just changed their UI. So exercises around how it could have maybe impacted them. So things like that.
See, as I told you, this reading and understanding products, understanding why Steve Jobs made something. So a lot of understanding and a lot of growth as a product manager for me has been through sources which were not directly related to product management. In general, I find that the most successful PMs that are around there, right, have always been fascinated by the things around them, and fascinated to know why a certain thing acted a certain way or was made a certain way. So I personally think always having that curiosity and always going after and reading whenever you read a new thing, right? I read about coronavirus and I started reading about gene sequencing, or on a very high level, but it's it's a kind of curiosity that helps me become better at my job. And trust me, I have found that these small bits of knowledges that I get through different sources have always come around and helped me in one or the other way. So personally, I think being curious and spending an hour and a half, and I think I replaced on my home screen, I replaced all the social media icons like Instagram, Flipkart, not Flipkart, it's still there on my homepage, but Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
and other apps with Medium, TechCrunch, and Napily. It's an amazing app if some of you have not gone through it, right? So I tried to do this, and as you asked, the kind of sources that I read, so I'll just share a list of sources that I have, right?
Awesome.
Which everybody can just copy these sources, and they will help you prepare and understand PMing in the best way possible, right? So case in point and
Awesome.
Vault Guide here because they help you build your problem solving skills, how to approach these problems. And Vault Guide is an amazing book for guesstimates, really good, which helps you understand and get comfortable with those numbers. As I told you, cracking the PM interview, then good PM, bad PM. There's this guy called Noah Weiss. If you follow him on Medium, he shares the most amazing product management related articles. I think you will find all the great sources of product management on his account on Medium. And then Design of
Yeah.
Everyday Thing and Hooked are something which less people will recommend, but is very necessary to understand how to build user-friendly product and user-friendly actions, how to
Yeah.
reduce the number of steps a user takes to complete a certain actions, those things. And all the other sources that I've mentioned are sources which have helped me. I've tried to keep it as minimal as possible and cover as many things as can be done.
Yeah.
So I think SVPG is the holy grail of product management. Everybody keeps talking about it. So that is there for sure. So yeah, I think these are the sources that you should definitely go for and give a read. And if you have any other doubts, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I can always help you with that.
Awesome. I think you made my job easier. That was about to be my next question. That would you have any specific resources or links that you would suggest PMs to read up? But I think you have put up a very extensive list of resources, as well as I can
Mm.
see a couple of books there as well, couple of blogs, podcasts, all of it. So I think it's a great mix of resources. Would request everyone to just like save all of these with them, because after the call ends, maybe it will disappear. So that would be great to do. Also, we had a couple of questions in the chat, so maybe we can address them. Uh, we can address the relevant ones. So one question was around the other rotational programs, right? So even
Yeah.
I have a great resource around this. I'll share it on chat. But do you know of any other rotational product management or APM programs that people might find interesting?
So unfortunately, in India, we don't have that many options. Uber, Facebook, and Google have the most exciting rotational APM programs. One of the good exciting APM roles to come out of India recently has been Rakuten. Rakuten has started their APM program, and I think that will be a great opportunity for people who are not able to get into Flipkart, for example. And then I think there are not many rotational programs, but entry level APM programs are there. I think Ola has an APM program now. Make My Trip has it. Ninja Cart is having an APM program, and I think there are a lot of companies. So feel free. I think if you reach out to anybody at IIT Madras, I remember there were 8 APM roles coming to IIT Madras this year. So if you have a friend at IIT Madras, just hit them up and try to make a list of those APM roles that are coming around.
Awesome. Also, someone had also asked, like, due to the COVID situation currently, is Flipkart's APM program still on, or is it delayed, or would you have any insights around that?
Sure. So I think it is very soon to answer, but from the looks of it, we are still on. Flipkart hasn't rescinded any hiring, and we haven't stopped or taken back any offers that we had made. And our new batch of APMs is joining on us on the first week of August. So
Awesome.
I don't see a reason why Flipkart APM program should stop. It will go on for sure.
Awesome. Also, I'll just plug in something that we were building. We were building a product called as Insurjo, which was kind of a APM program for companies in India. I've also shared the link in chat, so people who are interested in getting into product can check that out. Another question that has come in right now is MBA. I'm not. You haven't done an MBA, right?
No, I got into an APM program straight out of engineering. So I read that question, which was around
Yeah.
whether it's better to do an APM program and then and get into product management, or go for an
Yeah.
MBA and get into product management. See, so it's a question which really resides. Um, it's a very person to person based question, I would say. According to me, an APM program, if you are loving uh, product management, is the best way to go around product management for sure. But MBA programs do have certain advantages. Say around they are much. I have seen MBA graduates, and they know the technical jargons, and they know how to work around situations and how to use that communication, which will help them excel. But I have also seen that MBA programs take away that logical reasoning and risk taking ability of a person, and people are more conservative in the way they approach. So personally, what I would believe is, if you get an APM entry level job in one of the good places in, say, the first year of your career, or maybe in the first 2 years of your career, uh, I would suggest going for an APM program. But if you're not able to crack into good APM roles, and if you're not satisfied with the kind of opportunities you're getting, MBA is a great opportunity, because it really opens up all these major companies, be it Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and all these opportunities for you. So for an APM level person to get there will take some time. For somebody who has done an MBA, straight after your MBA, you can get into really, really good companies. So that will be the difference between choosing that. So if you think that you're in a good position and at an APM at a really good company, and you think you're learning from really good people, makes sense. Otherwise, I would suggest going for an MBA if you are targeting product management.
Awesome, awesome. So that's great. I think we are about to hit our time. So really interesting chatting with you, Anuj. Thanks for sharing detailed answers for every question, and actually sharing practical tips rather than just sharing generic stuff, right? Because at this point where people are trying to get into product management, or they are super early in their career, they need practical advice which they can uh, get started right away, no matter what their current position is, right? So thanks a lot for spending time with us in answering all these questions and helping the community. So thanks a lot.
Sure, sure. Welcome. I'll just finish the last question that's there, right? So,
Yeah.
what's the work balance like for PMs, right? So, I would be prepared for 3 months of health and 9 months of relatively relaxed life. And I say 3 months of hell, that is during the time when you will be launching your products, right? So
Yeah.
at least 20 days before product launch, I rarely get any sleep, because you're running all around, you're doing regression testing, you're working with engineers day and night to make sure everything is correct. And I remember uh, that during Big Billion days, I used to stay in office all 5 days, so that nothing should break in the website. So there will
Yeah.
be days where it's really, really hectic, I'll not lie, but that's really during the product launch days. And the feeling when you have launched a product and you see uh, 1 crore people using it, that feeling is immense.
Yeah.
I mean, right? And maybe even if you're at a smaller scale startup, right? When you see a lot of people use it and bring value out of it, that feeling is amazing. But otherwise,
Yeah.
it's a job where you require a lot of thinking on your own, spending time on your own. So work-life balance is pretty decent, I would say, because you spend a lot of time in writing your PRDs, and sometimes people write their PRDs from home, because that's where they get that clarity in their head to work on them. So it's a really good life, I would say, from a work-life balance perspective.
Great. I think that's a great note to end this session because we started with how do you prepare for product management. Then we are now ending with work-life balance of a product manager. And like you mentioned, sometimes you're firefighting, and sometimes when you see millions of people use your product, that that is the kind of satisfaction that everyone, like every product manager, craves for, right? So
Yeah.
that's super interesting. And I hope all of you enjoyed. We tried answering all the questions that we had on chat. I hope everyone enjoyed the session and we could cover all the questions that we could. And if you would like to know more about Anuj, is there anything specific, like maybe your social handles, or what would be the best way to reach out to you post this session?
I think you can all reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll just enter my LinkedIn profile over here. And if you have any questions or if you need any help, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I think
LinkedIn.
yeah, stay connected with Anuj on LinkedIn. Uh, he has he has some great advice for all of you. So if there are more questions that you think he could help with, please feel free to ping. If you think there are specific questions that you would want us to ask future speakers, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what kind of questions you guys would like us to cover. And just before we end, we have a very active LinkedIn community for product managers on. So you guys can join it. I'll just quickly share the links for that, as well as another event that we have coming up. So that's a fundraiser event that we are doing where we'll donate all the proceeds that we collect to COVID-19 funds running in India. So an interesting topic again, that event will be around how Reliance Jio is disrupting how people watch TV in India. So if you are interested in a topic like that, or the recent merger between Facebook and Jio, recent, not merger, but Facebook's stake in Jio, then that would be a super exciting event to attend. So thanks a lot for joining, guys. Just to end with it, thanks Anuj again. Thanks for sparing your time and helping with everything. I hope everyone liked this session.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Aditya. Feel free to reach
Thank
out to
you.
me for anything you might have. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.